Tonight on Greater Boston, from the Boston Public Library, the Chief Scientific Officer of the American Cancer Society and a Dana-Farber oncologist join me on just what it'll take to reach the goal President Biden laid out yesterday in Boston of cutting cancer death rates in half. Then Democratic candidate for Attorney General Andrea Campbell on her bid to become the first black woman to hold statewide office in Massachusetts. President Biden laid out an ambitious mission yesterday, and this one is personal. More than 7 years after his son Beau died from brain cancer, he stood in the library dedicated to President John F. Kennedy and delivered a challenge to the nation 60 years to the day after Kennedy issued his literal moonshot challenge.
Beating cancer is something we can do together. The goal is to cut cancer death rates by at least 50% in the next 25 years. To turn more cancers from death sentences into chronic diseases people can live with.
But is it achievable? What will it take, and what are the biggest obstacles in the path? I'm joined by Dr. William Dahut, who's Chief Scientific Officer at the American Cancer Society. Dr. Michael Hassett is a physician, Chief Quality Officer at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and Associate Professor at Harvard Medical School. Doctors, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Dahut, let me start with you. The rhetoric was undoubtedly powerful, but is this really a potential game changer in your world?
Well, I think one thing to consider is, 40 to 45% of cancers, both in this country and worldwide, are preventable. They're either from tobacco use, obesity, alcohol use, infectious diseases. So to put everybody together, whether it's biotech, nonprofits like ourselves, obviously the cancer centers, and ultimately the patient, I think we can get to this goal. It's not going to be easy. Getting to the moon wasn't easy. But I think putting things together, I think it's at least something worth striving for.
Dr. Hassett, do you share the optimism?
Absolutely, I do. Looking over the past 30 years, we've already seen a 32% reduction in cancer deaths. That's looking back to 1990. And as Dr. Dahut said, I think through better prevention, screening, diagnosis, and treatment, while it's an aggressive goal, it's an achievable goal.
So, Dr. Hassett, staying with you, explain to people what you believe. You touched upon it a second ago. What are the major areas that you can imagine this initiative having the most dramatic effect on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are 4 areas. The first is in prevention. Many, as we just heard, many cancers are preventable. And everything that we can do to prevent a cancer is a cancer we don't have to treat. The second has to do with screening and early detection. We have tools such as mammography and colonoscopy that we know work, but there are great new technologies that can help us screen and detect cancers even earlier, and they're, I think, going to be a big part of this initiative. The third is treatment. Cancer treatment has really revolutionized over the past 20 or 30 years, and that will continue. And the fourth, I think, is really managing the burden of cancer, the symptoms and the suffering that's caused by cancer and treatment. And if we can target those 4 goals, I definitely think this is an achievable.
Dr. Dahut, would you add anything to that list?
Well, I think those are actually tremendous points. The other thing, obviously, is making sure we have cancer access available to all in equal way. It's interesting, if you looked at cancer deaths based on SES in 1950, the folks in the highest SES actually had a much higher cancer death rate, probably due to less exercise and poor diet in that time. But over time, that's changed. And we now know that folks from rural areas, poor SES, and different racial populations have a much poorer outcome, stage for cancer.
Well, it's not just you mentioning that, Dr. Dahut, as I'm sure you both know. This whole issue of health disparities, which a lot of us finally focused on during COVID, was mentioned yesterday by the president. Here he is.
It's a disease we often diagnose too late and have too few ways to prevent it in the first place. Where there are stark inequities based on race, disability, zip code, sexual orientation, gender identity, and other factors.
Dr. Hassett, you went down your list a couple of minutes ago, but as a layperson, it seems to me that if nothing were to change except equal access to treatment, clinical trials, Medicaid funding, that sort of thing, that in and of itself could dramatically cut these numbers. Is that not accurate, or is that naive?
No, I agree with you completely. I think disparities are a huge piece of this problem, and one that the president mentioned in his remarks, as you point out. We have to address the disparities issue, and without doing so, I don't think we can achieve this goal. But I do know that we and other organizations, including the American Cancer Society, are dedicated not just to try to improving the technology of treatment, but improving the delivery of treatment so that we're providing effective treatments to everybody who deserves it.
You know, another thing the president spoke to, Dr. Dahut, was he mentioned mRNA technology and raised the prospect of some sort of cancer vaccine. I want to play yet again what he had to say on that subject.
To prevent cancers, scientists are exploring whether mRNA vaccine technology that brought us safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines could be used to stop cancer cells when they first arise.
You know, Dr. Dahut, I have to say, well, that thrilled me when I heard it. It also made me incredibly nervous. A couple of weeks ago, Dr. Fauci was on our radio show, and we spent a decent amount of time talking about this sick anti-science agenda that has captured so much of the population. Do you worry that when mRNA is part of the mix, and that triggered so many people inappropriately, I would argue, but nevertheless it happened, do you worry that this effort has potential to fall prey, at least in part, to the same anti-science crap that we've had to live with over the last couple of years of COVID?
Well, I certainly hope not. And I think if we think more broadly about mRNA technology and think actually the power of the immune system, then perhaps that becomes more palpable for folks. One great thing about an immune treatment is that it's actually a living treatment. It's a treatment actually that can basically change as the cancer changes. Many of our targeted therapies, again, one agent or one drug or one pathway, the cancer is smart enough to get around, but the immune system can adapt. So mRNA is a technology. It's not really a broad area of science, but really it's a means to deliver immunotherapy. So hopefully folks will understand that.
Yeah, unfortunately, what you're saying is dependent upon reason, which is not part of the debate in so much of the medical world this day. Do you worry about this, Dr. Hassett, based on the last couple of years?
I do worry about it, and I would echo the points just made. I think as I see the immune system, we know that it's already trying to fight cancer, and anything we can do to get the immune system to be more active in that fight is a good thing. And there are many different technologies that can get us there. I agree there's been a lot of buzz and misinformation around mRNA technology as one approach. But I do firmly believe that through education and hard work, we can get past that and get these treatments that we know are going to be effective out to as many people as possible.
Dr. Dahut, it seems to me that in addition to what the president said yesterday, and by the way, he officially launched this a long time ago when he was vice president in 2016, then relaunched as president in February, and I guess because of the 60th anniversary of JFK's speech about the, as I said, literal moonshot, he came here to do this yesterday. But it seems to me that provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, as it's called, also matter in the work that you gentlemen and your organizations do when you allow Medicare for the first time, it's incredible it took this long, to negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry. When you cap out-of-pocket costs for prescription drugs for people on Medicare, Dr. Dahut, it seems to me that can have a direct impact on access to the kind of treatment that we have even without these advances, no?
No, I think policy matters, laws matter. It's interesting. I'm actually speaking to you a block from the White House today. Today is the American Cancer Society's Cancer Advocacy Network Lobby Day, and today we have over 600 advocates from every state in the country and the district and Puerto Rico talking to the people on the Hill about what can be done. And talking about, for example, what happened in the IRA to really impact patients. I'm a prostate cancer physician. A lot of our effective drugs, their retail costs are $12,000 or $13,000 a month. Patients are on these for years, and capping this at $2,000 total for a year allows people to take the right dose of the drug and allows people to have a better quality of life because the cancer is less likely to come back.
Dr. Dahut, one more second with you. Did the people who visited their elected representatives encounter the same kind of irrational, partisan stuff that we've seen so much of, or is cancer relatively immune from that?
Well, cancer affects everybody. We're a nonpartisan organization. We're happy to get support from both sides. I'm from Maryland. I met with the Maryland folks, and they were very supportive. But my sense is cancer affects every single person, and only by working together through things like the moonshot can we have an impact.
So, Dr. Hassett, this one really is for you, is Boston-based, and let's be, I guess, short-sighted for a second. It seems to me that Boston has great potential to benefit, not only because of the incredible work that's already done here on cancer by organizations like yours at Dana-Farber, but when the president announced, I want to read it, the Advanced Research Products Agency for Health, I guess it's called ARPA-H because it sure as hell doesn't roll off your tongue. The woman who's going to run it, the doctor who's going to run it, is a vice president of a technology company right here in Boston, not to mention the fact that the guy who's going to make the decision about where that's placed, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, served in Congress with Richie Neal from Massachusetts, who's the chair of the, as you're always supposed to call it, the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. We have great potential to benefit even more than most, no?
Absolutely. Boston is just a center of biomedical research and technological innovation. And I think that this is a good thing for our industry and our citizens.
You know, Dr. Dahut, before you go, I was reading some numbers from your organization, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the expectation, the projection for 2022 is somewhere in the neighborhood of just over 600,000 people will die from cancer in the United States in this calendar year. And again, to harken back to what I said a minute ago, this was launched in 2016 by the vice president, relaunched in February. There have been a lot of resource problems and staffing problems. Is it realistic, for example, in your mind, if this becomes as real as the president wants it to be, that number in the future, instead of 600,000, could be 300,000? You believe that, apparently, yes?
I think it's time. We know the problems. We know people need to have prevention. We know to have screening and early detection. We know what it is. And we need to study how to do this. We can't just simply, put up billboards and expect people to go in and get a colonoscopy. So we basically, we know the problems, and yes, I think it can be done. And I'm glad we have the leadership in order to get there.
Dr. Hassett, we almost never end on an optimistic note on this television program. Do you want to end on one? Do you agree with Dr. Dahut?
I do agree with him. I, as a researcher, got funding from the Initial Cancer Moonshot program from 2016.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we've been making progress through that. And I think that success that we've had already really gives me hope that a reinvigorated effort is going to have even more impact going forward.
Well, I think everybody watching hopes both of your optimism is translated into outcomes. Let's hope it is. Dr. Hassett, Dr. Dahut, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Next up, the race for the so-called people's lawyer here in Massachusetts, or as the position is officially known, State Attorney General. After her historic Democratic primary victory last week, former Boston City Councilor Andrea Campbell will face trial attorney Jay McMahon. She joins me now. Andrea Campbell, good to see you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Great to see you.
So you'd be the first black woman statewide office holder. You've said that when you declared your candidacy, you were not even aware of that. Should that matter to voters come November 8th?
Well, what we heard on the campaign trail, and of course I've crisscrossed the state several times, is that representation matters. And it's not just the diversity and lived experience I bring. There is a unique lens to the work that I've also always brought. And so I know that matters. And the victory that we saw just a week ago really demonstrates that it does matter to voters, along with, of course, the policy and substantive issues that I addressed during on the campaign trail.
Why do you want this job? You wanted to be mayor not too long ago. These are totally different jobs with totally different kinds of functions. Why this one?
Well, just as I said, when we launched the campaign in February and every day since, I'm a praying woman. And I felt as though, for me, it was about making sure that I thought about it deeply. I felt like the opportunity, frankly, found me, but ultimately took the leap of faith thinking about the loss of my twin brother, Andre, who died while in the custody of the Department of Correction, and telling voters that this office could have, I think, done a lot more to address that case along with criminal legal reform, and really getting out there to express that the office is capable of helping families address healthcare issues, everything related to the Supreme Court, the cost of living, housing affordability, discrimination, and so much more. So I understand the magnitude and scope of the office and want to make sure it continues to be the people's lawyer representing the people's law firm.
Let's follow up on some of the things you mentioned. Healthcare, for example. We just talked to two doctors about Joe Biden's cancer moonshot announced in Boston yesterday. And we talked about a lot of this health inequities in cancer that we all talked about finally during COVID. Is there a role for the Attorney General to address those kinds of issues?
A significant one. We found in the campaign trail that I had to educate folks about the power of this office. There is a healthcare bureau along with many other divisions that is tasked with making sure residents have access to healthcare. We in Massachusetts are pretty lucky in that we have nearly universal coverage with almost 98% of our residents covered, but we still have to address cost of care, make sure that it's accessible to different communities, gender affirming, absolutely need to address reproductive health care and making sure the deserts that exist in Massachusetts are closed, and address the health disparities that exist, including in maternal health. There is a lot the office can do, and I'm excited about the possibilities to really close these gaps so everyone in Massachusetts has access to critical healthcare services.
I think everybody watching the shows knows what the Supreme Court has done on the gun front, on the reproductive freedom front. Let's talk about guns for a minute. The Boston Globe did a report a couple of days ago, I'm sure you saw. It was based in Littleton at a place called The Mill, but they talked about identifying at least 25 dealers of weapons in the state, including assault weapons, which are banned, which appear, according to the Globe, to violate Attorney General Healey's directive on assault weapons for a whole variety of reasons. Yet she has not brought charges against any of them. What's your reaction to that?
My first plan that I put out as a candidate for AG had to do with guns and looking at the ways we could strengthen our laws here in Massachusetts. There are folks indeed getting around our assault weapons ban along with other progressive laws on the books. We need to strengthen those. I actually propose establishing a gun enforcement unit within the office. Right now, most of the issues are surrounding guns are addressed through a consumer protection lens. We can change that. Greater enforcement is needed, including going after ghost guns, making sure we're dealing and working with and partner with, I should say, our police departments as well to ensure we're keeping guns off the streets. And gun hoarding is a major issue as well, which only leads to gun trafficking, particularly in communities of color. There's a lot the office can do along with addressing community violence. And so I'm excited about the possibilities as well.
Let's just stay on this for a second. The story was horrifying to me, and it appears the laws are there. It appears the directives from the Attorney General's office is there. What appears to be missing is the enforcement. Why, in your estimation?
Well, I can only speak to what I would do as Attorney General, and enforcement is critical. I've talked with assistant AGs who used to work in the office, who address these issues, who helped me actually develop my plan as a candidate for AG. So in establishing this new unit, enforcement would absolutely be a key part of it, along with working with the legislature to strengthen our laws that currently exist, but where loopholes are present. And then making sure we're also tackling community violence. I just had a student in my previous council district stabbed at Burke High School. Yeah. Community violence is present in various communities across Massachusetts, especially our urban centers. There's a lot the office can do to address those issues, including investing in organizations on the ground that are looking to break these cycles of violence. You
know, in addition to the statutory authority the Attorney General has, Andrea Campbell, I know you know this much better than I, it's also a huge bully pulpit in this state. So let me ask you about a couple things where you don't formally have jurisdiction, but you would have a bully pulpit. What's your position on the question that just qualified for the ballot around undocumented immigrants having access to driver's licenses?
I will be voting yes on 4. It's really sad to see that some folks mobilized a fear-mongering campaign to try to go backwards in terms of the legislation that was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. This is an issue I was supportive of when I worked as an attorney for Governor Deval Patrick. Okay. It makes sense. It makes sense economically. It makes sense in terms of protecting victims, those who lose loved ones in a car accident, how difficult it can be to track someone down, to hold them accountable and liable. It makes sense, and I will be voting yes, and I'm encouraging others to do the same.
Should I also assume you support the millionaire's tax, the fair share amendment that's on the ballot?
Yes, I'm on the record of supporting that.
Okay.
And really using those resources for critical investments.
Well, speaking of using those resources for critical investments, I'm sure most people viewing yet again know that for the second time since the law was passed by the voters in 1986, the so-called tax cap mandates by statute the return of what could be as much as $3 billion to the taxpayers. The auditor will make the final decision on that. I want to play for you what Maura Healey, the Democratic candidate for governor and obviously Attorney General, had to say about that on the night of her election victory.
The people voted recently to give everyone in the state tax relief if the state had excess revenue. And it looks like we do. So the people should get that money back as soon as possible.
So she seems to be arguing for the statute to be enforced exactly as it is. There are a lot of people, particularly progressives in the state, who say, one, sort of like what you just said about the Fair Share Amendment, that money shouldn't be used to give rebates to people. It, in fact, should be used to pay for needed services, or at least the law should be amended so if the money is returned, it's returned in a much more equitable fashion to the taxpayers than the way it is currently drafted, where by far the most money goes to the wealthiest taxpayers. Do you support the law being implemented as it is, or were those changes?
Well, based on what I'm hearing on the ground, I remember we talked about this before. I said, ask the people. And most folks are saying, give the money back. And I think there's an argument to say, give the money back. And I think what we don't recognize is that residents are struggling right now. They are worried about the cost of living, housing affordability. It is so expensive to live in Massachusetts right now. They're worried about access to health care. They're worried about a whole bunch of things concerning their family, their children. And if this is an opportunity to put resources in the pockets of those who are struggling or others, we should do just that. Even
though a disproportionate share would go to wealthy people who don't need it and a much smaller share go to the people you're describing. And
I think that's the part that people are pushing back on to suggest that maybe that's actually not the case. And so I think there's obviously more work to be done. But overwhelmingly, I'm hearing from folks on the ground, give the money back.
Yesterday, you were on the radio with me and Marjorie Eakin, and you surprised me when Marjorie asked you if you intended to debate Jay McMahon, who's the Republican nominee. Your response was, we did a four-way with the three Democrats and McMahon and Worcester, but the press didn't cover it. And then we asked you a couple of times, okay, fine, but will you debate him one-on-one? And twice you said, we'll see. Today we got a communication from Mr. McMahon saying that he'd love to debate you here and 6 other places. Have you thought about that in the last 24 hours? Are you still reluctant to agree to a debate with your Republican opponent?
When I said we'll see, it's because less than a month ago, only a few weeks ago, we did a debate. And we did it in Worcester with the Worcester Bar. It is online. It's an hour-long debate, extremely substantive for any voter to get the information to make distinctions between me and my Republican opponent. And there are major distinctions to be made. What I'm focused on right now is, one, thanking all the people who did the hard work of getting us across the finish line. And let me tell you, I'm still doing thank you calls. And then getting back out into community, including Central and Western Mass, to earn their vote, including our rural communities where I want to be more present to make sure they don't feel left out, left behind, and to have real conversations with real people. So when we said we'll see, it depends on what those other priorities are, which are significant and just as important.
So just so I don't put words in your mouth, there's no commitment as of yet to a one-on-one debate.
I will say we'll see again. I will stress that folks should watch that debate. And I'll just stress this. That debate was incredible. You had a college, a Worcester Bar Association put in significant resources to actually do it and to host one of substance and a real conversation. And it should be utilized. Most folks did not see it because they could not get the media attention that they wanted. So there's an opportunity to promote that, while at the same time for me to continue to thank my supporters and then, of course, get out there on the road to earn the support of more voters and to let them know that they have to continue to pay attention to this significant race because it does affect them in their daily life, and the AG's office can indeed help.
Andrea Campbell, I really appreciate your time. Lots of luck. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. GBH News culture writer James Bennett joins us with his latest drop, a list of things to do around Boston that won't break the bank, including some very timely bicycle riding lessons, which he decided to get in on. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thank you for watching. Please stay safe and don't forget Ukraine.
Today, we are going all in on a minor urban mystery here in Boston. In a typical year, the city of Boston issues about 5,000 permits for street excavations. Companies like Comcast and Verizon dig to lay cable. National Grid tears up stretches to repair gas lines. And well over 100 different private companies working for homeowners or commercial properties lay underground pipes that tap into water mains. Each time a company digs up a Boston street, they are responsible for repairing it when they're done. And crucially, the city has a 3-year warranty on every single one of those patches. According to city officials, about 10% of these patches go bad, cracking, crumbling at the edges, sinking, and they need to be repaired. When that happens, how do city officials know whether that particular patch is still under warranty? And if it is, what company is responsible for fixing it? That's where these guys come in. They are called A-tags, short for asphalt tags, and they are the centerpiece of the city of Boston's street repair tracking system. Though they are but little, about 1.5 inches in diameter, they are fiercely informative, if you know how to decode them. The year the patch was laid is marked at the center of each A-tag, so it's easy to quickly identify whether it's still under warranty. As for who laid each patch, city officials devised a color coding system. Now, big companies that do a lot of digging, they get their own custom colors, and they get to display their name on their A-tags.
National Grid, you're yellow. Boston Water and Sewer, you're blue. MWRA, you're light blue. Comcast and Verizon, you're orange. Eversource, you're red. I said the steam company, you're white.
Private contractors who work under the streets of Boston get a green A-tag with a unique ID number at the top. So all it takes is a quick look at a legend to know who did the job. A-tags have been required on every patch laid in the city of Boston since 2011, and companies can be fined if they don't embed their chip. The system has been a rousing success, according to city officials, who say the compliance rate is somewhere between 98 and 99%. As for that last 1 to 2%, now that you know the code, you too can be an inspector. If you see a failing patch in your neighborhood, call 311, or better yet, snap a pic and tweet it at boss311. So there you have it, the humble A-tag, an ace up the city's sleeve that keeps the odds high. The streets stay even. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and perhaps more importantly, ante up and let me know what you are curious about, because hey, I might just say, deal me in. I'm Edgar B. Horwick III. Stay curious out there.
The Curiosity Desk is sponsored by Emerson College, inspiring curiosity and creative expression in all of us.